Brian, Scott, Leslie, Mark, Craig, Stephen, Stacy, Lisa, Michael, Paul, Sarah, Joseph, Grace, Emily, Isaac, and soon to be Jacob. Well, when I was a little girl, my favorite number was 19. So I thought I'd have 19 children, but I didn't know anybody who had 19 children. I mean, that's how many we had in the classroom. So I don't think I ever really knew what the number 19 was, because our extended family, like aunts, uncles, cousins, and everything, was 9. So I don't think I really knew what the number 19 was, but that was my pretend number to have that many children, because I thought I'd be glamorous and gorgeous at 19, so I might as well have that many kids. I got married at 23 and a half. I graduated from college and went to work at the television station and came back to BYU they asked me to come back and do a new television show for them. And I got married when I was 23 and a half, after I almost finished my master's, and then I had my first baby at 24 and a half. We had another one 14 months after him, and the oldest one was really violent toward that second one. And I remember crying and telling my husband that we shouldn't have any more children, that we need to do some serious counseling, and we probably weren't meant to be parents, so we shouldn't have any more probably. But we didn't listen to that too long, and then we had another little girl, our first daughter, 2 years after that. And then 18 months after that, I had a little boy. 18 months after that, another little boy. 2 years later, a boy. 2 years later, another girl. 3 years later, another girl. And 20 months later, a little boy. And 3 years later, another little boy. And then 16 months after that little boy, our last biological child was born. And she lived only 24 days. And then we had a 4-year gap. And we had some real serious, tough experiences after losing a child, and I didn't want our family to end that way. I thought that was a real heartbreaking way to end a family, and so we tried medical intervention, and that didn't work, and then we had the opportunity to adopt, and that was a whole different realm that we'd never really thought of. I mean, we knew how to make babies. We had 11 children already. And then all of a sudden, they stopped coming. And we were given the opportunity to adopt our first child. And then 20 months later, a little girl came. And 4 months after that, another little girl came. And 9 months after that, another little boy came. And then 3 days from today, we're going to adopt number 16. My mother came from a family of 3 children. 2 died at birth. I came from a family of 3, me the oldest, and then a brother and a younger sister. My husband came from a family of 4. So I think in his mind we'd have 4 or 5 children. And, you know, and I didn't know 19, that was like a number to be gorgeous and glamorous, and nobody really had 19 children. So I don't know if I really had any preconceived idea of how many children I'd have. But when I was pregnant with our 4th child in Kansas City, I mentioned something to a man around the corner who couldn't see our house, who had no interaction with us, and my other 3 children were too small to leave the house. And I remember him doing kind of like a war dance on the sidewalk, going, "That's too many children." He was holding his head saying, "You can't have that many children." And I thought, he doesn't support them. He can't even see them. He's never even been to our house, and they're in the backyard. And so that was my first experience with that. And we lived in Kansas City, and people didn't have really big families in Kansas City. But as each one came along, we loved them, and I guess we got strength from our children and from ourselves that, you know, if there was somebody missing, I think everybody listens to a higher power, whatever that might be. I love Peter Cetera's song, "One Clear Voice Calling Out for Me to Listen." And I think everybody has some kind of an inner voice or a higher power, or whatever they call it, that they listen to. And when they do, their life turns out really great. And so the interesting thing is now, if I were to be having biological children still, I think there'd be a little bit different feeling. But for some people, the fact that we're adopting children is very benevolent, and I'm doing some wonderfully civic thing. But that's not what we're doing in our heart. We're gathering the children that we feel have always been ours to come to our family. So it's a little bit easier with society now that we're adopting, because in their eyes it is something like, wow, you're really neat. But that's not why we're doing it. And no, we're not really neat. We're doing what we think is right.